was just to hook me up. Make it funky. You better shout it out. Oh, can you feel it up in there? Lay that funk right down in your hair. Get it on when the funky bass go. Can you feel it in your heart?
Let's turn the music down. I'm hoping that music played, because if that music didn't actually play, I got to do some funky routing. If any of you have ever tried to pump the audio from your computer out to a live broadcast in a way that you can actually hear it at the same time without it getting sent up into the microphone, on the Mac, at least in particular, it's a little funky, but it can be done. What I'm hoping is that you actually heard that music, because if not, then you just saw me doing my little dance and looking absolutely epically foolish, and probably still looking absolutely epically foolish as it is. So, thank you for hanging out and joining me today, if any of you actually are. I came to a couple conclusions over the weekend. One is that there is no point at all in doing these live podcasts. Oh, dog, seriously? I hear the dog bark. I'm just going to ignore him. You guys might hear the dog barking. He can last 15, 20 minutes. He's already been out 15 times today. There's no point in doing these kinds of shows live if I'm not going to at least make the attempt to watch the comments that are rolling in on Periscope. Hi, Periscope. I see 11 of you right there. And on Facebook. And I see there's 6 or 7 people on Facebook right now. If I'm not watching the comments and so that I can at least interact with people, then there's no point in doing this. So I'm going to make a much better attempt at keeping an eye on that kind of stuff. 2, the other realization was that I've kind of in my head been dividing up this podcast into 2 sort of specific sections. One is live reviews of web tools and technologies. There's a lot of them that I have never written about or talked about on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and I want to do some tech reviews, 10-minute tech reviews, that sort of thing. And 2, panels and discussions, which is what I was going to do live, but then strip out the audio and push that out through the podcast feed. So, what I realized, though, that I left out of that was a chance just for myself to rant and rave like a maniac and share things that I thought were worth sharing personally. And I guess I could do that with the panel or with the interview, but if I'm doing a panel interview, I want to make it more about those other people. So, to that end, today is all about me. And if you don't really like listening to me, then this would be a great time to tune out. What I want to talk about today is there's a lot going on, obviously, with the political arena in the United States right now, and even more so in the way that we engage in conversation, the actual discourse between people. And a lot of it is being influenced by what we see coming out of both politicians and the news. In particular, the Trump staff and administration and so on, and you can contrast that with, let's just say, every major news network except for Fox News, because that's the way it seems to be sort of lining up. And the trouble with that is we've kind of created this environment where, and I'm going to actually pull up a buddy of mine named Brian Troyan. He did an excellent job of writing this up, and I shared it out through Facebook. I encourage everybody to read it. But he basically pointed out that what's being set up is this expectation where the entire country is being split into 3 distinct groups. One, the group of people that support the current presidency, and whether you can say that they believe it or don't believe it, whether they're being duped or not duped, but the point is, the things that are being said by coming out of the White House, they will trust, regardless of fact, regardless of whatever evidence or anything else, they will trust those stories. On the opposite side, you have the people who are not in favor of the current administration, and while some of them will say, no, we're just going based on facts, but the reality is they will distrust just about everything that they say, and they will attempt to back it up with facts and so on and so forth. But the point is, you've got those 2 polar opposites, and then you have this group in the middle that are saying, well, you can't trust either of them, so I just won't trust anything. And I actually, when Brian broke it down like that, that sounded like, nah, there can't really be people that are just that apathetic. But then I saw on Facebook, in response to several posts, people saying that exact same thing. You cannot trust the news. You cannot trust politicians. Therefore, you cannot trust anybody. Oh, thank you for the, I don't know what that little symbol is. Little hearts. Thank you on Periscope. So you cannot trust anybody. Now, it's one thing for an individual person to say, I can't trust anybody, and therefore I won't believe anything I read. But what complicates this is some of us are educators. And our duty is to teach students how to sift through this and how to make sense of it all. How to discern reality from fiction, fact from fiction, and how to be good, positive, productive citizens. And I've heard some people say, I believe Chris Lehman in particular was saying, it's more important than ever that we need to teach digital literacy or media literacy in particular right now. I've heard other people say, Steger, retorted that it's not necessarily about media literacy, it's just literacy. However you want to define it, we need to teach students to be able to discern what is real and how to base their opinions based on the information that they're getting in. Now, here's the trouble. It used to be all, for lack of a better term, easy to discern fact from fiction. Okay? Alan November used to have a great presentation called Teaching Zach to Think, and he talked all about, going back to reliable websites and looking at, where the website came from and what the, whether it was trustworthy or not and so on. And that's all well and good. But now that the rate that these stories are spreading, I'll give you two examples. One, the example that the statue of Martin Luther King was removed from the Oval Office. A reporter tweeted that out, and then other people jumped on it and started sharing it as if it were news. Now, props to the news community that did a retraction and said, but the reality is the horse is already out of the barn and so on and so forth. The damage has already been done. A lot of people won't see the retraction and so on. I really do believe that Trump and Kellyanne Conway and all those people have a very valid right to be upset about that story. However, you can't pretend to be upset about that story when you're doing the exact same thing on the other side when it benefits you. They're right. That story was absolutely pure BS, okay? But at the same time, there are other people who are doing that not accidentally, but deliberately to mislead people. An example of that, and I wish I actually had loaded it up. Oh, come on, Oreo, please. Just chill out for a little bit. Is somebody posted up a sign, and I believe it was shared on... Oh, I don't remember what. Some marching group, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It showed up a whole bunch of women holding up a sign, and one of the signs, holding up signs, and it looked like it was from the march, and the sign said, make them pay for razors if we pay for tampons. Ben Rhymes is the one who shared this with me, okay? That tweet or message got shared thousands and thousands of times, and if you actually go back and look at the comments on there, the comments are... I hate to say this, but they're despicable. All these people piling on and saying, "Oh, nobody's making me, giving me handouts for razors. Why should you get handouts for tampons?" Blah 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 blah. The whole thing is just absolutely ridiculous, and the sign didn't even come from the march on Saturday. It came from a protest in the UK some time back, and so on. It had nothing to do with, but they subverted it. They subverted that image. Now, here's my question to you. Okay? When you see someone post an image on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever, and they say, this is what somebody is saying, what do you think about that? Are you going to take the time to try and figure out where did that image actually come from? How much effort are you going to put into that before reacting? How much effort do we need to expect our students to put in? I saw a different picture. It was somebody who holding up a sign that said, patriotism is racism. And the implication, didn't expressly say it, but the implication was that it was from the Women's March. So I started doing searches last night, and this is like 11:30 at night, okay? I was ready for bed, but I couldn't turn the mind off. So I started doing Google reverse image searches to try and find where did that image come from. And I actually couldn't find 100% for certain where it came from, but I'm 90% sure at this point it was either from a rally, an anti-Trump rally in Chicago, or another one in California, where people are protesting Make America Great Again and all that other kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. And it also seems to be in reaction to some of the blowback from Colin Kaepernick taking a knee during the national anthem, part of that whole conversation. Now, in this case, the spirit of the message may still apply, but the point is they were implying that it came from the march over the weekend. People were reacting like it came from the march over the weekend, and yet it wasn't. So how much research do we now need to do before we can actually trust what somebody else is sharing and react in a way that is appropriate and constructive and not divisive? And I don't know about that. I'm a little worried about it, because it's a lot easier to just react from your gut and leave a message and not think about it again, or just to argue with somebody because what you're seeing in front of you appears to support the things that you're saying. I'll give you another example. Trump doing that impression of, I believe it was the reporter, I believe he was supposed to be autistic. I'll be honest, I don't even know. And we've all seen that Meryl Streep railed against it. A lot of people railed against it. I myself railed against it. And then I saw somebody share an article on a terrible website. Okay, the website was about as partisan as you can get. Most of the stuff on there was total bunk. But what they did have was a series of videos showing Trump doing that exact same impression again and again and again and again and again, mocking Ted Cruz with it, mocking Hillary Clinton with it, mocking himself with that exact same impression. Now, the impression itself looked like he was just basically being spastic and all that. I think it's about as lowbrow as you get. I would hope to have higher expectations and higher standards for middle school students. But he claims he was not mocking that reporter for having a disability. And the honest truth is, I think he's right. I don't think he did. I think it was still as lowbrow as you can get. And like I said, I think I would hope to have much higher expectations for a president-elect and now president. But at the same time, I think he's actually telling the truth there. So now here comes the question. When I see people posting that he was making fun of a reporter for having a disability, do I contradict them? Do I argue with them? Do I attempt to put the evidence in front of them that says, no, he probably wasn't mocking for having a disability. He might have been still being a jackass, but it wasn't because he had a disability. Is that worth correcting? And if I don't correct that, am I being hypocritical? Do you know what I mean? For only pointing out the negatives without pointing out, but only pointing out where his side has gone wrong and deceived people and so on, and not pointing out where I feel the people that I tend to agree with are. I mean, here's the reality is, you could say, does it really matter? He's still doing an impression of somebody who has a disability or is retarded or whatever. It's still just as bad. But is it just as bad if you call it out only from one side and not from the other? Or are you just contributing to this schism that we're starting to see in the social landscape? The reality is social media is one of the primary ways that we communicate nowadays. And are you just making it worse by not pointing it out when by not calling it out when the people you agree with are making a mistake as well? I don't know. This worries me. And then let's take it one step further. How do we teach this to our students? When our students are trying to form their own opinions, do they trust the people they trust? Or do they can they not even trust the people they trust anymore and have to 100% of the time go back and vet their own research? Does every single person have to be their own investigative reporter? I don't know. I'm starting to lean that way. During the campaign, I did an immense amount of my own research. I don't have the energy and the time to do that all the time. I wouldn't expect anybody else to. I've seen people floating around this graphic that says these are more reputable versions or sources of information and so on, of news reporting. You know, and they put CNN and USA Today down here. They put Breitbart down here. They put Vox down here. Occupy Democrats down here. And then up here, they put things like Wall Street Journal. It may have a slant, but for the most part, it's good investigative reporting and NPR and so on and so forth. And yet, here's what I have found my experience to be. More often than not, people agree with the reporting when the reporting vibes with what they already agree with. And when it doesn't, well, then it's just fake news or alternative facts. At what point can we draw these lines and say, we can trust this and we can't trust this? Or you can trust this, but trust it as an opinion and not fact. Those lines are getting blurrier and blurrier, and what really is stressing me out more than anything, is that 1/3 in the middle who have now come to the conclusion that we just can't trust anything. And if you can't trust anything, well then at some point you're just going to go with your gut. And your gut is going to be in line with the person who has done the best advertising, the best marketing, not the best truth. The reality is most beers are pretty close to the same. Most colas are pretty close to the same. And they all know this. When you're sitting there at the shelf and making a decision between two identical products, it's the associations you make with those products that are going to be what really puts your decision over the top. Do you like the Coke commercial better with the polar bears and the smiling and, enjoy a Coke with the one with your name on it or your friend's name on it? Or do you like Pepsi with the red, white, and blue and that kind of thing? That's what's going to make your decision. That's a terrible way to choose the people who are going to represent you in government. So how do we get back to a point where we can trust what we're seeing or know what to trust and what not to trust? How do we get back to the point where we're not flying off the handle based on something that we see that we haven't vetted ourselves, that we don't know whether it's true or not, that we take and react to that with just a sense of, for lack of a better term, moderation. Moderation. That we're willing to say, if this is true, then this is how I feel about it. And if it's not true, please, I would appreciate it if somebody would point it out to me. More often than not, people don't want to know if something is untrue. They don't want it pointed out to them. And that's a shame. Because shouldn't we be, especially in the education arena, shouldn't we be striving higher? I don't know how we talk to our students about this kind of stuff. How do we talk about alternative facts and all the rest of that kind of stuff, and how we deal with truth or fiction and so on. And thank you, Tom and Kimberly. I see you guys on Facebook. Maybe more people are chiming in. I don't know. Those are the only two comments I see. And thank you to all the people on Periscope that have sent hearts and messages and so on. I do have them both up on the screen, so I can actually see them and react. And if you've got a comment or a question or whatever, something you want to throw in, please throw it into the chat. But this is what I am struggling with, and what I'm trying to figure out is, how do we teach our students to be rational, to be moderate, to be civil, to engage in discourse, to be skeptical without, and to be able to discuss these topics, to have a conversation without it being inflammatory, without taking one topic in a debate, in an actual debate in school. You can't just take a topic and then just pivot off into a completely different topic. It doesn't work like that. In a court of law, you can't do that. But in a Facebook thread, that's what happens all the time. Hello, Seven Hills World. Thank you for joining. In a Facebook thread and so on, you can do that, and you do that, and it happens all the time, and then things get off topic. How do we focus? How do we have a conversation? How can we talk about alternative facts without talking about the email scandal and Benghazi and all that? How can we focus in on just, is there such a thing as alternative facts, and should we be basing anything upon them? Is there a way that we can discern truth? I'd like to think that there is. And even if it's not truth, at least maybe it's consensus. Maybe it's agreement. Maybe it's agree to disagree, and not just because we can't find middle ground. I'd like to think that we can agree to disagree because we respect the opinions and ideas of the person that we are disagreeing with. I can understand why some people didn't march. I can understand on Saturday. I can understand why some people were frustrated with the people who were marching. And that whole idea that, well, he's your president, what are you going to do about it? I do understand where they're coming from. I would hope that they could also understand why people are worried and felt the need to show that as a group, this isn't just a few people who aren't concerned, that it's a lot of people. I mean, that are concerned, that it's a lot of people, and they're doing it together. Appreciate the comment, Carrie. Carrie was saying how it's nice to start the Monday with a thoughtful topic. Thoughtful topic or rant, I don't know. But I appreciate that. I'm going to try and do this a little bit more often, and I think I've kind of run out of steam, and maybe it's time to step back a little bit. So in case you didn't know, I'm going to be trying to do this kind of thing either by myself or with other people about once a week or so, and it's being pushed out now through the Teach42 podcast. If you go into iTunes and search for Teach42, you'll find it again. You didn't find it for about 7 years. You'll find it again, and you can subscribe, and if you enjoy it, give it a listen and so on. If you disagree with me, here's how, if you want to push back on anything that I've said, agree or disagree, here's what you do. This broadcast that you're watching right now on Periscope or on Ustream or on YouTube or on Facebook or wherever you're watching it is going to be posted on teach42.com by the end of the day, okay? With just a little summary, maybe a couple links, and then this unedited broadcast. If you want to chime in on this conversation and dovetail off of it, leave a comment there. Okay? Stop by the end of the day, leave a comment, and let me know if you think I'm completely off the rails, or if you agree. If you have any suggestions for how to handle this with students, I can't speak for anybody else, but I want to hear it. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap it all up. And I just want to say I really appreciate your hanging out with me today, and I hope to see you on a podcast more soon. If you're going to be at the FETC conference, I'll see you in just a couple of days. If you're going to be at TCA, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. I'll also be at ICE, the ICE conference in Illinois, the MACE conference, and McCall. And I'm really excited to be reconnecting with a lot of you at the events in the next few months. So until then, thanks for tuning in, and have a wonderful week.
Well, just hook me up.
So just in case you don't know, this is a song called Broadband Connection by Sinister Dexter. This was the theme to my podcast for a few years.
Make it funky. You better shout it out. Can you feel it up in there? Lay that funk right down in your hair. Get it on when the funky bass go.
All right, fading out. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and have a wonderful week. Bye-bye. Where's the stop button on this thing? Farewell.